Hi, brothers and sisters. Thanks for taking a little bit of time to check in with this video. As always, it's good to have just a few minutes to interact in this way. And it is Tuesday afternoon, January 25th, as I'm recording this. And I've been thinking a lot about the passage from this last Lord's Day that we looked at, Genesis 32, verses 22 to 32. It's been deeply impacting in my own life, just the glory of God, the goodness of God, the power of God, the love of God, the mercy of God, even in attacking and breaking Jacob in order to bless him. And everything that God's doing with Jacob there is not just with Jacob, but it's all tied in to God's eternal purposes and his covenant promises that began, at least he began to express with Abraham, and then, of course, Isaac, and now Jacob. And all of this is the means of bringing about his sovereign purpose to bring the blessings of salvation in Jesus Christ to the nations. And so, everything we see God doing with Jacob, this is our God. This is the same God who lives forever, who is eternal, who had no beginning, who has no end. And he's our God, and this is how he is with his people. And so, one of the things I've been thinking about, even following Sunday, is just the raw display of power that God brings to Jacob that night by the banks of the Jabbok as he wounds him, as he cripples him, as he dislocates his hip. And of course, Sunday I talked a bit about the nature of that injury and just being reminded that this was no human injury. In other words, this was God as a man who was wrestling with Jacob. But at the point that he touched his hip and dislocated it, it was a display of his power. This was a display of his force in which he injured Jacob in a way that only God could have done. It was a supernatural injury, it was a miraculous injury. And it got Jacob's attention because it's at that point then that Jacob clings to him and says, I'm not letting you go until you bless me. And it's a reminder to us that God is infinitely powerful and he can do anything that he chooses to do when he chooses to do it. And that's not only true in a general way, it's true in a very personal way in our lives. Many, many years ago, when we still lived in Simi Valley in Southern California, our kids were very, very little. And I remember an incident when I was working on something in our home. I don't remember what it was I was working on, but I had my work gloves and it was some project. And as is often the case, it wasn't going very well. I was hoping to fix something in a short amount of time. It wasn't working, and I was getting frustrated. Very candidly and ashamedly, I was angry in an unrighteous way. And so at one point, just in frustration, I walked away from what it was I was working on in the house. I went outside to our garage, pulled open the garage door. It was one of those big one-piece doors that you lift up. So I lift it up and I go into the garage where I have this little workbench and I just threw my gloves on the workbench in absolute anger. I mean, I was ticked off because my project wasn't getting resolved in the way I wanted it to. Well, as soon as I threw my gloves down on the workbench, I turned around to walk out of the garage in a huff of anger, and immediately my head ran into a bottom metal brace on the garage door, and it just threw me to the ground. And it just happened like bang, bang. Threw my gloves, turned around, hit the door, boom, I'm on the ground. And I just laid there and I honestly started kind of laughing a little bit because it was such an immediate graphic demonstration of God, in essence, saying, okay, Greg, if you're going to be angry and unrighteous like this, let me just whack you a little bit and kind of throw you to the ground and remind you that you're not in control. And Lori and I laugh about it now. She kind of saw the whole thing happen, and there's a whole backstory to that. It was an encouragement to her that her husband was indeed accountable to God, and he has his ways of smacking us, not because he's against us, but because he loves us. And as with Jacob, he attacked him and he broke him in order to bless him. That was an event in my life years ago that was a graphic reminder that I need to never forget that I'm accountable to God. So I just want to encourage all of us with these truths that we've seen in Genesis 32. We're going to continue to learn more of God and his dealings with his people. I think a very practical application point for us, I mentioned a number of them on Sunday, but could really kind of all be summarized in the exhortation we find in a number of places in the New Testament, namely to humble ourselves under the mighty hand of God. That's what Peter says in 1 Peter chapter 5 verse 6, after he has just said in verse 5 that God is opposed to the proud, but he gives grace to the humble. How much better for us to humble ourselves under God's mighty hand rather than having to be attacked and broken by him. So I want to encourage us in those ways, even as it's an encouragement and a reminder of my own soul, that we would be doing that, humbling ourselves before the Lord in prayer, in the disposition of our hearts, in being under His Word, and seeking the accountability and encouragement and counsel from others as a means of humbling ourselves. That we would do so, that God would have His way in our lives, and that we would know and live in His blessings. So I pray that you will be doing that, even as I trust you'll be praying that I'll be doing that, and that we would be encouraging one another in those ways. Well, I want to remind you this coming Lord's Day, January 30th, we are back to our regular schedule and framework of things after these last couple of weeks that we've done things differently because of a number of folks having COVID. We know there are still some of you who are experiencing that, and we are praying for you and praying that things restore to normal quickly for you. But in the meantime, we're planning to go back to our regular schedule this Sunday. So we'll have equipping hour at 9 a.m. inside. We'll have our worship service at 10:30 a.m. inside. And then at 5 p.m., we'll have our members meeting, which, as always, we encourage and implore those of you who are members to make that time a priority as we gather together as God's people and interact about things going on in the life of the church. We'll have some good refreshments and food afterwards, and I want to encourage you to be there. But that'll be the plan for this coming Lord's Day, and so encourage you to be there. The last thing I want to encourage you with is with this newsletter, we always provide an overview of the order of service for the coming Lord's Day, and sometimes it'll change a little bit, but usually it's pretty clear, or I mean that's the plan at least with what we're doing. There's a new song that we're going to introduce this Sunday. It's a song that I shared the lyrics from this last Sunday in the sermon. It's entitled, I Ask the Lord That I Might Grow. And in the newsletter with this video, there's a link. If you're not familiar with that hymn, I'd encourage you to listen to it and to be encouraged by it and let it minister to your own soul. It's ministered deeply to me through the years. But we're planning to sing that during our worship service this coming Lord's Day. So if you're able to listen to it a bit, it'll, of course, help familiarize you with it. And then you can sing that much louder and that much more passionately as we share together this coming Lord's Day. So hope you'll be able to be with us, if not physically, even just joining with us online. We miss those of you who are not able to be with us and hope that you'll be able to be back with us again soon. But thanks for checking in with the video, and richest blessings to you in Christ. And Lord willing, we'll see you this Sunday. Take care. Bye-bye.